My parents gave my brother the house and laughed at me. 5 years later I owned the street. The January wind cut through the bare trees of Maple Grove, a middle-class neighborhood in the suburbs of Philadelphia where identical two-story colonials lined the street like dominoes. Number 1847, my childhood home, glowed warm against the gray afternoon, smoke curling from its chimney into the Pennsylvania winter sky. I sat in my 10-year-old Honda Civic across the street, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching the golden lights spill from the windows. My brother Derek's BMW was already parked in the driveway, gleaming despite the salt and slush. Of course he was early. Derek was always early when it benefited him. My phone buzzed. "Mom, where are you?" "Everyone's waiting." I exhaled slowly, my breath fogging the windshield. 28 years old and I still felt like the kid who couldn't do anything right in their eyes. The house smelled like pot roast when I walked in, the same meal Mom made for every important family discussion. Dad was in his usual recliner, beer in hand, watching the Eagles highlights. Derek sat at the dining table, his posture relaxed, confident. The golden child who'd graduated from Penn State with a business degree and now worked at a financial firm downtown. "Maya's here," Mom announced as if I were late, though I'd arrived exactly on time. She didn't hug me. She never did anymore. "Let's get this started," Dad said, muting the TV but not turning it off. "Your mother and I have been thinking about the future. About this house." I felt it then, that sinking sensation in my chest, like standing on ice that's starting to crack. Derek leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, wearing that slight smirk I'd seen my whole life. The one that said he already knew how this would end. "We're getting older," Mom continued, standing by the archway between the kitchen and dining room, arms crossed. "We need to think about what happens to our assets. The house has been in this family for 30 years. We've decided," Dad cut in, his voice flat matter-of-fact, "to transfer the deed to Derek." The words hung in the air like smoke. I blinked. "What?" "Derek is more financially stable," Mom said, her tone almost defensive, as if she'd practiced this speech. "He has a real career. He can maintain the property. He understands investments." "And what about me?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. Dad finally looked at me and what I saw wasn't cruelty, it was indifference. Somehow that was worse. "Maya, be realistic. You're still working at that coffee shop. You're in your late 20s with no degree, no prospects. What would you do with a house?" "I'm taking night classes." Night classes at community college," Derek interjected, his voice smooth. "Mom and Dad need someone responsible. Someone who won't let the place fall apart." "This isn't about responsibility," I said, my hands trembling. "This is about favoritism. You've always chosen him over me." "That's not fair," Mom snapped. "We've treated you both equally. If you'd applied yourself like Derek." "Applied myself?" I stood up, chair scraping against the hardwood. "I've been working 2 jobs since I was 18 because you wouldn't help me pay for college like you did for him." "We helped Derek because he had a plan," Dad said, his voice rising now. "You dropped out of Penn State after 1 semester. That was your choice. I dropped out because I was depressed and you told me to get over it." The silence that followed was suffocating. Derek laughed then. Not a full laugh, just a quiet chuckle that felt like a knife between my ribs. "This is exactly why you can't be trusted with real responsibility, Maya. You're still blaming everyone else for your problems." Mom nodded and Dad turned the TV volume back up. I looked at the 3 of them, my family, and felt like I was disappearing. Like I was already erased from this house, this history, this life. "So that's it?" I asked quietly. "You're just giving him everything?" "We're being practical," Mom said, refusing to meet my eyes. "When you get your life together, maybe we can talk about other ways to help you." But I heard what she didn't say. "You'll never get your life together." I grabbed my coat and walked toward the door. Derek called after me, his voice dripping with false concern. "Maya, don't be dramatic. It's just a house." I stopped at the threshold, snow beginning to fall outside, the cold air rushing in. "You're right," I said softly. "It's just a house. And you're just my family. Both things I clearly don't need." "Don't be ridiculous," Mom said. "We're doing what's best for everyone." I walked out into the January night, and as I reached my car, I heard Derek's laughter carrying through the open door before it slammed shut. I sat in my Honda for 20 minutes, crying silently as snow accumulated on the windshield, watching the warm lights of 1847 Maple Grove. The house I'd grown up in, the house I'd just lost, the house that proved I'd never been enough. Then I dried my eyes, started the engine and drove away. I didn't look back. The first year was brutal. I moved into a studio apartment in a rundown section of South Philadelphia, 40 minutes from Maple Grove. The neighborhood was rough, sirens at night, peeling paint on every building, chain link fences around postage stamp yards. My apartment had water stains on the ceiling and a radiator that clanked like a ghost in the walls. But it was mine. I stopped answering my mother's occasional texts. Stopped checking Derek's social media posts about his promotion, his new car, his life that kept getting better while mine looked worse on paper. But something happened in that silence. I worked the morning shift at the coffee shop, then drove to campus for my classes. Accounting, business law, real estate fundamentals. I studied in my car between jobs. I studied on the bus. I studied until 2 a.m., then woke up at 5 a.m. to do it again. My co-worker at the coffee shop, Marcus, a 60-year-old man who'd immigrated from Jamaica 30 years earlier, noticed my textbooks one morning during the slow period. Real estate? He asked, wiping down the espresso machine. Yeah, I said, embarrassed. Probably stupid, right? Stupid. He laughed, a deep, warm sound. My daughter studied real estate. Now she owns 4 rental properties in West Philly. Real estate's how you build real wealth in this country, especially if you ain't born with it. That conversation changed everything. Marcus introduced me to his daughter, Keisha, who became my mentor. She taught me about investment properties, distressed assets, house flipping, rental income. She showed me the unglamorous truth. Real estate wealth wasn't about mansions. It was about patience, timing, and being willing to work in neighborhoods everyone else ignored. People with money ignore opportunities because they're not pretty enough, Keisha told me one afternoon in her office, a cramped space above a laundromat. They want the pretty houses in the pretty neighborhoods. But wealth. Real wealth comes from seeing value where others see garbage. By the end of year 1, I had my real estate license. Year 2, I bought my first property. A foreclosed duplex in an emerging neighborhood, bought at auction for $42,000. I lived in one unit and rented the other. The place was a disaster. Broken windows, holes in the walls, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. I learned to do repairs from YouTube videos. I plastered walls at midnight. I painted in the February cold with the windows open because I couldn't afford proper ventilation equipment. My hands bled. My back ached. I cried from exhaustion more times than I could count. But I didn't quit. By year 3, I'd sold that first duplex for $127,000 and used the profit to buy 2 more properties. I was working 16-hour days. Managing renovations, dealing with contractors, handling tenant issues, still pulling shifts at the coffee shop to cover gaps. I had no social life. No dating. No vacations. Just work and a vision I couldn't articulate but felt in my bones. I will never be powerless again. Keisha helped me form an LLC. Heart Properties. I named it, taking back the family name they'd made me feel ashamed of. Year 4, I owned 7 rental properties across Philadelphia. I quit the coffee shop. I was making more from rental income than Derek probably made at his finance job, though I didn't know for sure. I'd blocked him on everything. I drove past Maple Grove once, by accident, taking a wrong turn after viewing a property. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Neat lawns, American flags, the same kids' toys scattered in the same yards. I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just a distant recognition, like seeing a hotel you'd stayed at once years ago. By the end of year 5, I owned 14 properties. My LLC was valued at $1.2 million. I'd built something real, something solid, something no one could take from me or laugh about or dismiss. And then I got the call. The real estate agent's name was Patricia, a sharp woman in her 50s who'd been selling houses in the Philadelphia suburbs for 20 years. I've got a unique opportunity, she told me over the phone in late March. A street in Maple Grove is going through a generational turnover. 5 properties are coming on the market within the next 6 months. Elderly owners passing away, families moving for jobs. It's not listed publicly yet. I thought of you because you've been so aggressive with acquisitions. Maple Grove. My street. Which street? I asked, though I already knew. Sycamore Lane, she said. You mean Maple Grove Drive? Yes, sorry, Maple Grove Drive. Numbers 1823, 1831, 1852, 1868, and potentially 1875. Are you interested? I was silent for a long moment, looking out the window of my office. A real office now in a converted warehouse in Fishtown that I'd bought and renovated. Send me everything, I said quietly. Over the next 4 months, I bought every single property Patricia brought me on Maple Grove Drive. I paid cash for most of them, beating out other investors. I outbid families. I moved fast, decisive, ruthless in a way I'd learned from watching wealthy people operate. The houses needed work, but I had contractors now. People who knew me, trusted me, did quality work because I paid them fairly and on time. By August, I owned 6 houses on Maple Grove Drive. I didn't live in any of them. I renovated them carefully, tastefully, increasing their value. I rented 3 to young families. I kept 3 vacant, pristine, waiting. And then one September morning I drove back to the old neighborhood in my new Audi Q5, wearing a tailored blazer, my hair professionally styled, looking like someone who belonged in boardrooms and closing meetings. I parked across from 1847, my childhood home, Derek's house now, and waited. The neighborhood had changed in small ways. New paint on some houses. Different cars. But the bones were the same. Derek emerged at 8:15 a.m. just like he probably did every workday. He was in a suit, carrying a leather briefcase, looking successful and satisfied. He didn't notice me at first. Then our eyes met across the street. I saw the confusion flicker across his face, then recognition, then something else. A tightness around his eyes, a tensing of his jaw. I stepped out of my car slowly, deliberately. I didn't smile. Didn't wave. Just stood there letting him process. He walked toward me, stopping at the curb. Why, Derek. What are you doing here? His voice had an edge to it, defensive. I own 1823, I said calmly, gesturing to the house next door to his. An 1831. An 1852 across the street. An 1868 3 doors down. An 1875 at the corner. An 1891 around the bend. I watched his face as the information settled in, as he did the math, as he realized what I was saying. You, what? I own 6 houses on this street, Derek. Soon to be 7 when 1839 closes next month. I pulled out my phone, showing him the property management app with my portfolio. Hart Properties LLC. That's my company. His face went pale. That's impossible. You were working at a coffee shop. That was 5 years ago. My voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. A lot changes in 5 years when you're not laughing at someone else's struggle. He fumbled for words, something I'd never seen Derek do. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. I put my phone away. You meant every word. Every laugh. Every dismissal. And Mom and Dad meant it too when they decided I wasn't worth investing in. Where are Mom and Dad? I asked, though I kept my tone neutral. Inside. They're visiting for the week. Perfect. Tell them I said hello, I said, turning back toward my car. Oh, and Derek? The property taxes on this street went up significantly this year. All the improvements I've been making have increased the assessed values. You might want to budget for that. I drove away slowly, watching him in my rearview mirror, standing frozen on the curb, staring after me. 3 days later my mother called. I stared at her name on my phone screen for several rings before answering. Why, Her voice was tight, controlled. Derek told us you've been buying property in the neighborhood. That's correct. Why would you do that? Why here? It's a good investment, I said simply. Property values are stable. Good school district. Low crime. Same reasons you and Dad chose it 30 years ago. Silence on the other end. Your father and I would like to see you, she said finally. Can you come to the house? I'd rather not. Maya, please. We need to talk. I hesitated, then, there's a coffee shop on Main Street. Pressing. I'll meet you there tomorrow at 2 p.m. Just you and Dad. Not Derek. The next afternoon I arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a table by the window. The cafe was quiet, filled with the gentle hum of conversation and espresso machines. My parents arrived exactly on time, looking older than I remembered. Dad's hair was grayer. Mom moved slower, her hand on Dad's arm for support. They sat across from me, and for a long moment nobody spoke. You look good, Mom said finally, and there was something in her voice I couldn't identify. Pride? Regret? Successful. I am successful, I replied evenly. Dad cleared his throat. Derek told us about your business. Your properties. Hart Properties. Yes. Why didn't you tell us? Mom's voice rose slightly. 5 years, Maya. 5 years of barely speaking to us, and now you're buying up our neighborhood like a stranger? I finished. That's what I am, isn't it? That's what you made clear 5 years ago. That's not fair, Dad said. We were trying to make a practical decision about the house. You were trying to give everything to your favorite child while making sure I knew I was worth nothing. My voice stayed calm, but the words cut deep. There's a difference. Mom's eyes welled up. We never said you were worth nothing. You didn't have to say it, Mom. Derek laughed at me. You stood there and watched him laugh. You chose him over me in every way that mattered, and then you acted surprised when I stopped pretending we were a family. We're your parents, Dad said, his voice rough. We'll always be your parents. Biologically, sure. I took a sip of my coffee. But parenthood is more than DNA. It's showing up. It's believing in your kid even when they're struggling. It's not choosing favorites and then acting shocked when the rejected child walks away. What do you want from us? Mom asked, tears streaming now. An apology? Money? We don't have much, Maya. The house is all we. I don't want anything from you. The words came out softer than I intended, but they were true. I stopped wanting anything from you 5 years ago. That's what you don't understand. I didn't come back here for revenge or to hurt you. I came back because it was a good business decision. You just happened to live here. Dad's face hardened. So we mean nothing to you now? I thought about that question, really thought about it. You mean less than you did, I said honestly. But not nothing. You're still my parents. I don't hate you. I just don't need you anymore. And that's what you wanted, isn't it? For me to stand on my own. Not like this, Mom whispered. Not with you looking at us like we're strangers. You made me a stranger first. I stood up, gathering my coat. I'm not here to punish you. I'm here because I built something real, something that can't be taken away or laughed at. You taught me I had to do that alone, so I did. Maya, wait. Dad reached out, his hand trembling slightly. What happens now? I paused, considering. Now. Nothing changes. I keep building my business. You keep living in Derek's house. We exist in the same neighborhood but different worlds. Just like we always have. You're really not going to forgive us? Mom asked, her voice breaking. I looked at both of them. These people who'd raised me, fed me, sheltered me, and ultimately shown me I wasn't enough in their eyes. I forgave you 3 years ago, I said quietly. Not because you deserved it, but because holding on to that anger was holding me back. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It just means I'm no longer carrying your mistakes as my burden. I left cash on the table for my coffee and walked out into the September sunshine. Behind me, I heard my mother sob, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt the urge to turn back to comfort her, to be the daughter who made everything okay. But I kept walking. 6 months later, I closed on 3 more properties on Maple Grove Drive, bringing my total to 9 houses on the street where I grew up. Derek and his wife listed 1847, my childhood home, 3 months after our encounter. They couldn't afford the increased property taxes and maintenance costs, not with the new twins on the way. I didn't buy it. I let a young couple with 2 kids purchase it instead. A teacher and a nurse who reminded me of what family should look like. 2 people building something together, supporting each other, choosing each other every day. My parents moved to a retirement community in Delaware, closer to my mother's sister. I got a Christmas card from them that year. I sent one back. We're cordial now, distant but not hostile. Derek and I don't speak. Hart Properties continues to grow. I'm now mentoring 3 young women who remind me of myself at 28. Hungry, dismissed, determined to prove everyone wrong. Sometimes I drive through Maple Grove Drive at dusk, watching the lights come on in the houses I own, families gathering for dinner, kids playing in yards, life happening in spaces I've created and maintained. I don't feel vindicated or victorious. I just feel like I finally exist on my own terms, built by my own hands, laughed at by no one that matters. And that, it turns out, is worth more than any inheritance.